Got it. Alive.
I'm glad we had a chance to connect. Yeah, best wishes on the. Let's have a chat.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Great speaking with you. Really good. Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll thank you.
Yeah, I'm traveling for about 6 weeks. I'm going to Malaysia.
Nice to be there.
Yeah, it'd be lovely weather.
Best time to be there.
Great weather. You know, you're going to have a thunderstorm at about 5 o'clock, but if you go away at 6 o'clock, you can go out. You know, in the evenings.
Last time we were in India, so nice to see sunset at 6:30.
Where were you?
I mean, we switched between Delhi, Mumbai, Indore.
Oh, I'm from Indore.
You are?
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Oh my God.
Oh. I'm born and brought up in Indore.
Same. I was born there. I came to the UK when I was 5 in 1971. But I've lived in the UK.
I was born in 78.
All right. How's small world? It's a bit small.
I went to South Indian countries. You wouldn't know because you moved out.
Yeah, no, I just know San Rafael and all these sort of ones.
That's exciting. Yeah. Do you know Vijayanagar?
Yeah, Vijayanagar, yeah.
We lived there.
Okay.
And then we still have a house there. But I have my apartment in Mumbai and one in Delhi. So when I was in India, people used to ask me where are you from. Now I can say, okay, I'm from India. But if somebody from India is asking where I'm from, it's just like, left Indore. Yeah, moved here.
We had a back office. We had about 250 people. Really? Yeah. Just like the park eventually. We moved there. We were on AB Road. C20.
So you've been doing it.
Yeah. We used to go regularly. I mean, I was doing my development work out there.
Right.
We started with a company in Chennai, and then yes, payments company. We started there about 1992 with my previous company.
Right.
We've always had a payments team in India. So we grew that to about 250 people.
Makes so much sense to have
But Indore has changed from that point on in the early 90s. The population was like 250, so you can still get around very nice. Now it's what, touching 5 years. It's a nightmare. It's the cleanest city in the country. It's absolutely superb.
You know, because the land is so crazy, the airport is the best. We'll be there, in fact, for like 15 days. Because my wife's an assistant getting she's getting married and wedding is already indoors. We were for 15 days.
I actually went back to England to get married. My wife, we met here. We decided to go to
Really?
We were the first, actually, it was a joint wedding. My brother and I were the first people that ever closed off MG Road from the Mahatma Gandhi statue. That's where my daughter's house was around where surname's Patty, T-A-T-N-I.
Okay. Because I know a family who has this relationship with one in
Oh, I know.
So they were one NGO.
They were all like, but they all were huge on that road.
Hello. Can I request one of you to please take your seat? syllabus.
Great.
Great.
Usually we start
Usually
on
we
time.
start on
Today's
time.
sort of
Today's been sort of
an unusual
an unusual thing,
sort of a blunder
being committed by the security downstairs, who is not allowing a lot of people to come up.
So that's the reason we kind of
But nevertheless, we are here.
And so
And
therefore a very
so
good
therefore, a
evening
very
to
good
each and
evening
everyone
to each and everyone out here.
Thanks for making it. A very warm welcome to each of the
members who present here,
as well as
the panel members.
Today we are
completing the 11th episode of Tech Tuesdays.
For some of you
who are attending Tech Tuesdays for the very first time.
Tech Tuesdays UK
stems from the very idea of building a community that ideates, nurtures,
and then
fosters a field for discussion of disruptive technologies,
which have the
potential
to
to impact a billion lives.
As most of you would know,
Tech Tuesdays is a monthly event which takes place on the first Tuesdays of every month,
where we spend about
an hour and a half
having
conversations around technology.
The most
unique thing about Tech Tuesday, as you realize, and as some of you may know,
is
this is a free-flow conversation when we do not have any given script, a moderation, typical speakers, or a given set of questions.
Moving on,
this event would not have been possible without the active support of our partner, KNL Gets,
who have been supporting us
for the last 10 months
and way forward
as well.
I would request
each one of you to spread the good word around, because that's what we have.
We don't have a marketing
budget, to be very honest.
So during the event, as well as after the event,
please tweet,
please talk about us
and LinkedIn. Our Twitter handle is
X handle
is at techtuesdaysUK.
And on
LinkedIn, use the hashtag at
techtuesdaysUK.
UK.
You can also catch
up with the previous episode of Tech Tuesdays on YouTube.
Last but not the list, as a tradition,
we've also created a video bite station,
or sort of a doc,
where we'll invite some of you to sort of come and share your feedbacks.
We will
record this video and use all our digital channel to sort of talk about your feedback.
Please hang around
after the session for the drinks and networking time.
As you may be aware,
every episode of Tech Tuesdays is based on a particular topic, and today's theme
for the evening
is generative AI.
And to drive the
discussion today, we've got some amazing panel with us.
Let me take the pleasure of inviting
each one of them and request them to take their seats.
Can
I have a round of applause, please?
We have Kate Hudden from
Microsoft today.
We have Samit Rao, who is the CEO of Infosys Pinnacle. And last but not the least, my dear friend Jasprit Berira from Tech Whisperer. And all credit Jasprit, in spite of a bit of fever. You're good. But if you're weak, take the all the way from Cambridge. But yes, here you are. So I leave the floor in the hands of two of you, and good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Great. So, yeah,
This is better.
I guess we have a very informal way of doing this, so we're not going to necessarily have too many rules out here. I just thought that the way to start this would be to perhaps do a little round of introductions from our end, and I'll throw about a couple of questions which we will talk about. But after that, we just want to have this as an open conversation. Questions from all of you, not necessarily directed only to us, because I can assure you that we don't know all the answers, in fact, very few of them. But, it's more a conversation around some of the aspects of generative AI as we talk further. So maybe, Claire, if I could, maybe you could introduce yourself, and then Sanat, and then I do the honors.
Happy happy to do so, and lovely to be here with everyone today. I'm Claire Dugan. I'm a business analyst at Microsoft UK, working as part of our Responsible AI Centre of Excellence, where we take our culture of trust and responsibility-based innovation and work with our customer and partner ecosystem within the UK to embed responsible AI into all innovation.
Hi everyone, Sanath. Though I've been in the technology industry for a long time, I'm known as the one who doesn't know technology. But more recently, I like to introduce myself as someone who is researching and reading a lot about matters which are the intersection of human behavior, culture, and technology. And in the last 5 years, I've got back to academia in my 50s, studying digital anthropology and then AI ethics. And I think some of the discussion today, at least my focus is going to be on topics in that area. So nice to be here and looking forward to a great conversation this evening.
Great, thank you very much. I have a long introduction. Yes. Of late, over the last 5 years, I've been working in technology, AI, Web3, digital transformation. I've written a couple of books around that. I teach in a few places around that. I consult, I speak. I had a corporate avatar before that, where I was with Microsoft and the Tata Group and the Mahindra Group. Of late, a lot of my work, a lot of my interest has been pretty much like Sanath's in the intersection of technology and other more important parts of our life, like philosophy, society, ethics, sociology, and you know how AI, how they intersect primarily with AI, but other technologies also. So it would be lovely to know. A lot of my interest also is in specifically how Indian philosophy and technology, especially AI, sort of influence each other, and so that's the other part of my work. So again, thanks. Great to be here. Over the past in technology, actually, we have this saying which originally I think was attributed to Vladimir Lenin, who's not a very popular man these days, which was that there are decades where nothing happens, but then there are weeks where decades happen. And in AI, specifically with the advent of generative AI, the last few weeks and months have been where decades have been happening every week. It's just impossible to keep up. So many things happen. Even yesterday was another momentous day with OpenAI doing its dev day and changing generative AI all over again. And something else is going to happen tomorrow, and something else is going to happen. So there's a lot to talk about in artificial intelligence and its latest avatar, which is generative AI. AI, as most of you would know who work in the industry, is not something very new. It was something which was coined way back in 1956. In fact, the story goes that it was called applied statistics before that, but the name wasn't sexy enough. It did not get the right grants for research, etc. And so Marvin Minsky and others, kind of thought up this new sexy name, which was artificial intelligence, and that's how it was coined in 1956 at the Dartmouth conference. And so AI has been a technology which has been there for a long time. It's been discussed. It's been doing a lot of good stuff, enterprises, otherwise. And as Andrew Ng, another godfather of AI, says that it's like electricity, not only because it's silently powering everything around us, but we think of electricity only when it's not there. And similarly, AI, before generative AI, we never thought of it unless it was not there and things would stop around us. But with Gen AI coming in, especially ChatGPT, almost exactly a year back, it has become the topic du jour since then. And that's what we are going to talk about and discuss and have a conversation about today. And so I just thought that, maybe we could just kick it off, Sanath and Claire, starting with this whole hype, in a sense, which is around AI in general and generative AI in particular. And as you work with large financial services, fintech, you work with one of the large big techs, both of you are heavily involved in AI and generative AI. How do you see the last year, and how much of it is you think real, and how much of it you think is fluff around the reality? It would be great to know that, and I'm sure some of the audience also would be interested.
So I'll start by divulging that this is not the first time I'm talking to these two. In fact, we've been on a learning journey over the past almost 2.5 years together at the University of Cambridge, along with our colleague Christine on the front row, on a course specifically looking at AI in society and AI as a socio-technical system. A lot's changed in the past year with the advent of generative AI through systems like ChatGPT and associated media hype. I think the everyday user is now playing around with tools that before would have been relegated to the realm of that's someone who works in tech and does machine learning for decision making. Actually, now we're seeing generative AI used in the day-to-day and become ubiquitous, and also potentially now going to be something that we will use like we use the internet or any other technology tool. I think with that, there's a lot of exciting opportunities. I, for one, suffer from blank page syndrome, i.e. I'm staring at a blank page and I have a lot of thoughts in my head. What do I write? I can now put some bullets together. I can prompt the generative AI model and get, for example, a paragraph or a LinkedIn post or a blog post or something to start with. Like, that's cool. It eliminates that blank page syndrome. If I'm working, I can apply that with certain tools, for example, Microsoft Copilot, to eliminating that blank slide syndrome or blank Power BI syndrome. And technology aside, whatever company you're working for will now have some sort of assistant or generative AI based tool that you'll work inside and alongside with. Now, in that, it's important to remember that some of the ingenious thought, again, it all starts within the human, and it's important to keep human in the loop. And remember that socio-technical systems, i.e. people and processes, along with technology, need to exist and work together in a responsible way. And it's not surprising that with the advent of generative AI, we've also seen moves towards regulation, mediations via tooling, and critical assessments of what this means now as a tool within our lives.
So I think, Jaspreet, you used the word fad in your opening remarks. And in the last 1 year, as one has been amazed by the manner in which ChatGPT has captured everyone's imagination, I've often asked myself the question saying, is it a fad? I don't have an answer to that, but I'm going to say something slightly provocative. To the best of my understanding, a fad cannot be something that scares you. Now, why does ChatGPT scare me? It has many, many advantages. Claire outlined some of them, and certainly I use it, like I'm sure everyone here does, and certainly has benefits. And as Jaspreet said in his opening comments, there's obviously a lot more to come because it's developing and maturing at such a rapid pace. And even with the onset of possible regulation, I don't think it will necessarily impede the progress and the way it will get infused into our day-to-day lives. That said, in my mind, when I weigh the pros and cons of something new like this, there's one factor that scares me. And it is this, that as you find more and more large organizations announcing their own LLMs, I'm worried that most of these big organizations, which are behind the more prominent LLMs at the moment, are organizations whose business model is predicated on monetizing personal data. To my mind, that is the one single factor which makes me wary about something like this. Like every new technology, of course, there are many aspects which are good and they'll be beneficial, and as it matures, of course we'll leverage it. But I cannot believe that the likes of Google, and apologies if anyone here is from Google, that's just an example, but I cannot believe that the likes of Google or Facebook, which is claiming that their LLM is going to be open source, or indeed Amazon, which is now invested into Anthropic, and Apple is supposed to be coming out with their own LLM. These are organizations whose business model is wholly and solely around monetizing using personal data. Right? It's only a matter of time before we find that as we get enraptured by ChatGPT and start using it for anything and everything, questions will come up saying, in what manner will we be victims to exactly the same business model? Because mind you, these companies are not changing their colors, right? They can't suddenly change their business model. On the contrary, if a new technology that this is becoming so popular, arguably the most popular new technology development in the last many years, I think there was some data point about how rapidly the first 100 million users signed up to ChatGPT. The more popular the uptake, the more likely that our personal data will get used, right? And that's the conundrum I'm not able to necessarily find an answer to in my head. Saying that while I fully see the benefits of this and I look forward to more and more developments, and for someone like me who doesn't have a technology background, and I write a fair amount, not as much as Jaspreet does, but I write a fair amount, and certainly ChatGPT, and I've signed up to Cloud as well. They give you the hints and they give you a broad outline, and then you sort of work and develop your own thoughts around that. But each time I wonder where this issue will come up around personal data getting used. And mind you, that has not yet been discussed at the moment, right? Everyone is still fascinated by these LLMs that are being announced, but that whole concern around how will you get used has not yet sort of surfaced as an issue. Will it go the way it happened in social media, where we acknowledge that the more we use social media, our personal data gets used, but we've just sort of submitted ourselves to social media saying that we can't live without it? Will ChatGPT and LLMs go that way? I don't know. But it's that factor which makes me believe that this is not a fad, because I don't believe by definition a fad can be something that scares you.
So, I definitely have a view on this, which I will give. But your comments on data and for privacy and all the other things actually perfectly tees up my second question, which I'll ask, which I'll discuss in a bit. I was thinking of, this definition of fad not being scary. And I do agree. I mean, the last fad, which thankfully was a fad, was those tall jeans with holes in them. They were scary, thankfully it was a fad. But in technology, maybe, yeah, you're right. This hype thing, just coming back to the hype bit, just my views on that. And we'll have the second question and then we'll kind of open it out. So, I'm sure you already have a lot of questions. But I've been working in and with technology for a very long time. And with every one of them, I've now developed in my own head what I call a hype to substance ratio. So, for example, the hype to substance ratio you remember this word metaverse? We used to talk about it a lot last year.
I almost wrote my dissertation on it. That was hype.
Yeah. In fact, I now count these different gatherings that I'm in where the word metaverse is not used. And it suddenly disappeared from the lexicon. But if you kind of look at the metaverse, the hype to substance ratio was really very high. There was a lot of hype, we know that. You could probably measure it in amount of news articles written or column centimeters or whatever. And the substance, when you went into Horizon or one of these metaverses, you would find 73 people there basically not knowing what to do. So it was very clear that it was not being talked about a lot. Now that is very different in this case. Just yesterday, Sam Altman confirmed that there are actually 100 million plus active users, not just people who kind of used it once and then left. And that's what I tell people, that 100 million people plus, because that's only ChatGPT, right? There's also Bard, there's also Claude, there are bunches of other things. that there are 100 million plus POCs, which are proof of concepts, which have already happened. And so in many senses, this is beyond POC land. And so, the height to substance ratio in this, in a sense, is fairly much lower, probably the lowest that we have seen, across different technologies. Definitely, there are a lot of, broadly speaking, ethical issues around it. That's what the four of us and a bunch of others, I'm sure, spent the last couple of years formally studying, and probably came out more scared than we went in. But there is certainly a reality, a solidness to this particular technology, and then almost a miraculous kind of a feel that has not been there since some of these earlier, when the aircraft first went up, people used to like stand up on their seats and applaud. I mean, it was such a miraculous thing. And actually today also, I think every plane that takes off, we should applaud, because it's an amazing way we have kind of worked with physics and made something happen. And that same kind of miraculous thing, I think, is now we are seeing, and that's why we have these 100 million, 200 million, whatever number of people here. And therefore, I feel this is real. Just thought I'd give it a try. But then that brings us to the next, or the second piece of what we wanted to talk about, and then we'll open it up. With ChatGPT, many things happen. Among those, I mean, everyone, we had 100 million users. People suddenly started talking about AI. AI experts like myself started mushrooming out of nowhere, and all over LinkedIn. And beyond that, what also started happening, as you would have noticed, was that there was a race amongst companies, and not only companies, countries, to lead in AI. So every country wanted to be like have the most, number of, the first or second or third in the ranking. Was it China which is leading? Is it the US? What's the UK? What's UK doing? Where's EU? Where are countries like India, etc. But along with that race, what we have now seen is, especially over the last 1 week in which a decade has happened, that there's now a race to regulate AI. And that race actually is probably even more bigger than the development race. And now Biden dropped a bombshell a week back. People didn't, which actually I think shocked Rishi Sunak more than anyone else, because he was teeing up for this big global summit, and then the global summit happened, and the EU is just going to come up with their recommendations, and China had been first off the block, and now everyone is kind of looking to regulate AI, primarily because of some of the concerns that you articulated, Sana. But the question that I had in all this verbose blabber that I had done was that, do you think that it's even possible to regulate this piece? Is it even possible? Are we just is it a pipe dream? Even if it was possible, are we too late? As the horse disappeared voting from the stable, and would love to have your views on that.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on one of the words you said, which was, this is no longer hype, it's solid, and actually suggests a new metaphor we carry with us for this discussion, borrowing from Professor Shannon Valor, but to look at AI as a mirror. It has the potential to reflect back the most beautiful, creative, optimistic parts of society, augment human intelligence, remove the dull tasks, fight my blank page system. However, with that and the data in which fuels it, it has the potential to reflect back the worst parts of our society and our humanity. Now, sticking with that metaphor, let's look at the materiality of regulation. And actually, regulation on a technology that's changing and evolving. At the AI Safety Summit, I think it's safe to say we heard that regulation is the backbone of innovation. And actually, to be an innovative company, person, country, culture, you need to have regulatory sandboxes in which to play, and you need to have certain standards to agree on taxonomies or definitions of things and ways to understand a technology and make those technology systems play well with each other, i.e. interoperability. I think we learned a lot from social media. We learned a lot about human behavior from social media, and we learned a lot about the ways in which power plays out with corporations who control social media. I think it's an interesting observation that corporations are leaning into being pro-regulation right now. They're saying, here's the technology, we want to be part of shaping these regulations. And I think we learned a lot of lessons from what went wrong when we didn't have regulations in place. I think regulations will have to be agile and iterative, and also be a continued conversation about what happens in the next 6 months, 1 year plus with generative AI and the tools and the new ways of working and the new ways of being it creates together. However, one thing I would encourage is to look at the users, and especially those who don't work directly with technology. Look at the children, look at the elderly people, look at those on the margins who this tech has the potential to adversarially impact in a negative way, and put those people first when you're looking towards innovation and actually saying, how do we bring them along on the journey with us to understand what this technology is and how to interact with it, understanding both the benefits and the risks.
While a lot of the discourse in the last 1 week has certainly been about the timing of President Biden's announcement and how he might have stolen the thunder from what happened here at Bletchley Park, I think the real exam question is not whether US will be the first or whether a UK-centric forum or consortium like the 28 odd countries that signed up, whether they'll be the ones who will outline this. I think the main exam question is, will the 4 or 5 or 6 mega powerful technology companies give weight to governments? I don't think anyone has an answer, and our answers and our views will probably change over time because regulation is not going to happen overnight. It's certainly a welcome fact that these big companies are themselves talking about the need for regulation. But I'm still wondering whether these 4 or 5 companies who are more powerful than any companies have been in the history of corporate across industries, will they actually eventually wield power, or will they submit to something that's driven by central governments? I'm not pessimistic on many matters of technology, but on this particular matter, I am pessimistic. Because I believe that behind the very positive noises that are happening right now, and that's certainly a welcome change from what we've never seen in the past, I do believe that when the rubber hits the road and they start getting into the detail, and right now it's all motherhood statements being made at the 35,000 feet level, right? When committees get formed, when they start getting into detail, when you start figuring out what kind of restrictions are going to be placed on some of these big companies, that is where I think we'll see what the true intent of the technology companies is. And I'm not saying that the people behind these big companies are bad people, by no means. I mean, obviously there's a lot of benefit that the community is deriving from these technologies and these organizations. I'm just saying that the companies who have tasted power and success like no companies in the history of the corporate world, they're not going to submit themselves to regulation overnight. Of course, they'll be at the table in all the discussions that happen, and that's good because you need to have all stakeholders. So their points of view will be taken. But I think we are still a very, very, very long way off before regulation and compliance comes in the manner that we understand it. So if you take financial services, for example, which is arguably the most regulated industry in the world today, it's inconceivable for banks and the others to do some things which challenge the regulator. The regulator is supreme there. I simply don't believe that that kind of scenario is anywhere close to happening as far as technology is concerned. Not because people don't want it to happen. I just think it's going to be too big a departure, and it's not going to happen overnight from what's happened in the last 10, 15 years when the likes of Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft and Apple and the others have become so very powerful. So I think it's welcome, all the dialogues that are happening. It's the first time that all these stakeholders are actually there at the table and everyone is asking for regulation. But I think the true test will really come when as they said, the devil is in the detail. So we'll have to see what's happening.
Yeah, just taking off as a last comment from this side of the table. Just taking off from what both of you said, especially you said, Sanat, one interesting thing, and again, I want to throw something provocative here for discussion later. While there is this race, for regulating AI, and therefore, if you wear rose-tinted glasses, you think that people have learned. They have learned from nuclear power energy. They're not waiting for a Hiroshima to happen. But they've learned from Cambridge Analytica and the whole Meta Facebook scandal and the whole social media stuff, etc. And therefore, they're acting like a responsible adult and coming to the table. Actually, if you peel a couple of layers of that onion, regulatory, you'll see there's something very interesting. I actually am this particular article I'm publishing day after on this Friday. And what is really happening is that if you see the discourse is about what is called frontier AI. And frontier AI, as most of you would know, is about super intelligence. It's about when AI becomes more powerful than us. And if you see Sam Altman, if you see Demis Hassabis, if you see all of these other guys, they're largely saying that, look, we need to worry about that. Humanity losing control, and so we need to regulate for that. So the UK summit, surprise, was actually about frontier AI, not about AI problems. The whole thing was about what, at that time. Around the same time, perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not, OpenAI released an announcement saying that they're setting up a group to tackle super alignment. Super alignment is that how do we align the values of that super intelligence and human beings. And so, they said that, look, we're kind of working towards that. Now, yes, super intelligence is a possibility, but we would all agree that the probability of that is fairly low at this point of time, and it's far away. And therefore, it's very convenient to talk about that and therefore distract people from what are the here and now issues of AI, which is related to bias, to privacy, to plagiarism, to environmental degradation, and a bunch of other issues which have to be solved now. But it's sometimes good to kind of distract to the future and talk about issues related to possibly jobs in a sense. And my belief, and my provocative belief there, let me just throw it out on the table and then we'll stop, is that a lot of times when people ask me about jobs, will AI take our jobs? I mean, for every dollar, if I was to get $1 or £1, each time that this question has been asked to me, I would be a significantly richer person. But the thing is, will it take our jobs? What do I need to do? Whatever. And my considered reply to that usually is that AI will not take your jobs, but someone using AI will. And therefore, you need to be the person who uses AI. And in the same manner, I believe that it's not AI which is going to kill us. It's actually someone using AI who will. And so it's not about super intelligence and a Terminator machine coming and, kind of eradicating humanity. It's much more about someone who uses AI to subvert an election and democracy, therefore, and therefore getting a desirable for them person becoming the political leader or the president, and therefore, or someone else a dictator who's militarily pushed to the corner using lethal autonomous weapons, for example. It's us human beings which we have to regulate, not as much AI. And the associated provocative thing after which I'll stop is that I do also believe, Samak, that one of the things this technology might bring in is this shift of the world not being ruled by governments, but the world being formally ruled by corporates. Okay, going forward. So we might see a newer kind of governance structure. And if this is the direction in which it happens, who knows, we might end up with a different kind of a governance or a governance system. So lots of food for thought here, and largely pessimistic, taking off from Sanat's acute pessimism on this technology. But I just thought that this form, and the questions as they need not necessarily be questions. Comments are as welcome, if not more welcome. How do you feel about all this stuff? And maybe we will just have a conversation amongst all of us.
Full disclosure, I'm ex-Google and ex-Meta.
We just give a microphone to you.
The X part is interesting.
I think, thank you. Claire, your comment about the agile governance and the way that we're moving forward, I think is really, really critical insofar as, to Sanat's point, there are so many things that we don't know yet and have yet to even be put on the table. And you mentioned as well, we shook hands downstairs, so I consider us friends at this point, right? We were coming together. But the Cambridge Analytica, the use of first-party data, the misuse of first-party data, clearly I think that is what the corporates really do want to avoid. How we're going to do that, because we don't have a central governance approach. It's not that there's going to be one government, though we can postulate on which government would like to be that, but one government that's making all of those decisions. Were we to have an aggregate global body of government representation, you even look at how the EU functions, and we're not able to get to consensus on that. So I think that those are some really important pieces that you've put on the table. And I think the agility, I'm going to add another one to it. I think it's going to be the learning that we're going to need to really take and be very agile moving forward as well. Michael, if anyone has any comments.
Yeah, hi. I run a company which we provide solutions for basically to fintechs and banks, and which we provide, AI solutions for compliance, basically for AML and like money laundering, MLRO and stuff. So when we are talking about regulation, it's already there, because it's all about data modeling. It's not about AI or anything. AI is just a front-end tool. Here, I have never heard about data modeling. There's a lot of regulations on data modeling, because already there is a GDPR compliance, and again using the data which is coming from the ledgers of a bank, and applying data model on top of it to achieve data model and training for taxation, to identify taxes, to identify compliance management, and also for AML and other compliance transaction monitoring. So the problem here I am seeing here is about typologies, especially financial crimes today increasing in this modern payments world. There are a lot of financial crimes, drug trafficking, child trafficking, everything, which we are monitoring using our own transaction monitoring tool, which is built out of data modeling. I don't care what it is, GPT or whatever it is. It's just another search engine for me. But what is underlying with this is important, which has already been regulated heavily, because today I'm taking data from some ledgers, from Finacle or from Oracle or from some other banks which is providing to us. But how I'm going to use it, there is already a regulation, but we are successful in it in a way where it has been regulated already, very much within the compliance of GDPR and other things. So here, we are talking about only generalized AI, which everyday people use, but deep down it needs to be categorized into different industries. Already different industries are regulated heavily, and how you use the data, how the typologies has been available on there. it's not about what we see in the chat GPT, but typologies. That's where it ends up. So if somebody can able to regulate the typologies, yeah, that is where it's a comment actually. Yeah. So we largely use Vertex and TensorFlow, where we create our own GPT models. Just another comment. And my comment on all this glamorous world is all these companies who invested heavily on cloud computing and all this fiber optics cable lying around the oceans. They want to create more avenues to make more revenues. They come up with these words. Other than that, we are using it from last 10 years. We built this, what do you say, like a transaction monitoring tool where we reduce the false positives for the compliance officers. So that's my take on it.
That is what is called a very pragmatic take. So, there is this thing in regulating AI where people say that don't regulate it at source, but regulate it at the where it's being used. So, if it's being used in the financial services industry, regulate it there with, in the financial services regulation. If it's being used in pharmaceuticals and health, then regulate it at the FDA level, or equivalent. And so don't regulate it. Let the AI companies create what they want to create. Don't stop them.
Data model companies.
Yeah, data model companies, but regulate it at the end point. That's a conversation which is out there with its both sides, pros and cons. I don't know if you had anything, Sanat, on that or.
Well, I'll just add one. I think you're very right to call out that you're almost building on the backs of giants, GDPR, data governance, basic data ethics and kind of those principles. I would also argue that generative AI offers different challenges that need to be addressed through different types of regulation, particularly on the socio-technical side. So, for example, the ability of generative AI to target via phishing campaigns of misinformation or, call your nan and use cognitive voice to represent your voice and represent some very personal facts that she might be susceptible to then giving personal data about. These are new types of harms that I think are more based in the human interaction and human user side of AI and generative AI that I would like to see regulations address.
Yeah, Microsoft is in the midst of launching this, which is really big, is around taxation tools for e-wallets and KPMGs, where Microsoft is on the verge of this will be bigger on corporate, not on the because they collect data from financial data from these corporates and they avoid manual intervention on it. And most of this transaction, ledger certification and transaction data is regulation is needed. But on this part of the world that we do day-to-day activities.
What Claire was saying, something very interesting. Okay, that look, AI, actually generative AI is a different beast than AI. It's not a linear thing. It's not the logical next step of machine learning, deep learning, and therefore next is or natural language processing, and therefore next is this. It's very interesting, but if you kind of read Noam Chomsky or some of these big scholars, they argue that the single thing which has made the human species separate itself or differentiate itself from all other species is not intelligence, is not even emotion, is not even consciousness. It's actually the use of language. And because we could use language in a much more efficient way, we could actually, 8 billion of us could collaborate and talk with each other, and we became the apex predator, the apex species. There's no other species until now which is trained on language. The only other species now trained on language is something called a large language model, okay, which is the basis of generative AI. And it actually learns broadly the same way that a child learns, in just lots of random pictures, language, paragraphs, etc., speech, etc., and then draw patterns to kind of figure out what to say next. And that's why it makes up stuff as it goes along. That's why it is optimized for not for facts or the truth, but optimized for plausibility or believability. And that's why it hallucinates. If you like it, it's called creativity. If you don't like it, it's called hallucination. But who's the other thing other than ChatGPT which does that? It's actually us. And that's why we say, please tell us, please tell me. And after it tells you, it says thank you, because it's kind of the closest, and that's why it's a very different beast in that sense from just the linear, and therefore needs a different kind of treatment, thinking, regulation than just masses of data and AI. Sorry, we have said something.
On a different topic, so please finish this one.
Yeah.
So we did an experiment. I'm with Microsoft, but what I'm proud to say is not Microsoft. It's still. So we got invited to a couple of forums in India where Cambridge, a lot of few brains from different part of the world, different industries came together and tried to say, can we define principles that is accepted cross-corporate? So we spent approximately 6 months, different people from manufacturing, chemical engineering, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. We came and said, Microsoft has its own sets of responsible AI. So does Google, so does Meta. Can we define a way to regulate and at least provide the principles how cross-industry can agree to something? A common Microsoft, Amazon, Google, manufacturing, chemical industry. How do you conform that consortium that everybody agrees to? And after 4 months, we failed miserably, as we expected. Then we narrowed it down to, okay, let's start with manufacturing industry. Because we were running out short of deadline and Cambridge was knocking the door, we have to produce something. We somehow got together when we left the responsive AI from Microsoft, this from Meta, this from Google, then there was something that we were able to do. So my comment, and maybe you're asking for your perspective over here, is there a more of a democracy in terms of, just like we choose different products over here, right? We have 3 hyperscalers, giant over there. Similarly, different consortiums of compliance and regulations that would organically form. There is one way of having each industry, but communities organically get associated based on your belief systems to different parts of, I believe in this regulations, I believe in this philosophy. Is there a way that we can have some sort of an agreement between, cross industries? How do you, which of the principles do we apply for? Is Microsoft right? Is Google right? Is Meta right? Who's right over here? Maybe people just organically form into their own communities and start believing. So what's your perspective in terms of how do you have to have a centralized model, or is it a distributed model?
Well, realize one thing. So the leaders, the technology leaders in our minds, right? They would criticize AI. For example, Elon Musk is the guy who was like the biggest criticizer of this technology, right? And what did he do? He released his own LLM, right? And now he's competing against ChatGPT 3 point something, right? And now he's saying we'll make it better than version 4. So they would say, okay, we would want to regulate it, but in their mind, they're still trying to see how can they make more money out of it. So they are going to launch it. For example, Elon is going to launch it on X, and for X Premium only, right? So I don't see that happening. There's also one more thing which I've realized is I was working on this use case where I was working with an organization who provides technology around digital twin. And we were basically creating a business value chain for a financial services organization. And we said, okay, we are going to deploy a digital twin and what we are going to do is we are going to create a model around the best person who could identify a problem and can resolve it. And that's what we do. So, and we ask him to use Gen AI, and then the digital twin model was basically copying him. So ideally, what we ended up achieving was a far better digital twin model. So that is where I see that technology complements each other if they're used for the right purpose in the right way. But I see a lot of hypocrisy going around it, and yeah, and that's how it is. Thank you.
Can I just request something? Each time someone speaks for the first time, just do a short introduction of who you are. Just helps us relate.
Hi there. My name is Christina. I'm an AI researcher. I work with a few different organizations doing AI policy, but mainly standards creation. So I want to go back to the conversation earlier about how regulation could potentially keep up with innovation. And I want to offer an example from my experience working with standards. So I'm just wondering if this is the right framing. I like to kind of reframe this question a little bit to offer an alternative premise and just say, for example, instead of asking, how could standards keep up with innovation? Because this is a question we get a lot because standards take a long time to create and they're not mandatory and so on. So instead of asking that, what I like to say is we could ask, how could innovators could already use standards now to benefit both the market and the public in safe and responsible ways, right? So I'm just wondering if the panel would think that this kind of reframing would be useful when we think about regulation. Do you see value in that? Do you see that as an approach that could, force a different kind of thinking in regulation?
I don't know if you want this.
I mean, this is not only the panel, so anyone can any comment on what Christina said?
Well, Christina, what I think is you cannot create an unbiased standards for any of the genders, right? Because the body who will be creating those standards will anyway be biased towards that particular geography that ocean affects, would want to favor those organizations. So that's what my viewpoint is. On a global level, if everyone wants to come together and wants to create those standards, I don't see that happening. It's like a far-fetched dream. And and our view and vision for singularity keeps on moving.
Yeah.
At one point in time, we used to think if we can have something which is very similar to GenAI, it would be like even achieving singularity. Now we have achieved GenAI, and our vision for GenAI for singularity is now moved to the other post. So this will keep on changing, and the good thing is with the advent of these models, we can see that we can see faster implementations of LLMs, and we will see. I'm very positive and optimistic about it. But yeah, this technology is here to stay, and it's really changing.
So I think what Christina was mentioning, I think is I mean, you don't have to wait for regulation to come. If you think of any other industry other than tech, okay, everyone innovates within a regulatory or a rules order and umbrella. Okay? I mean, the drug industry innovates. It innovated amazingly during, whether you're an anti-vaxxer or vaxxer, keeping that aside. Okay, it innovated, during the pandemic. Okay, the automobile industry innovates, and the electric vehicles, autonomous, semi-autonomous vehicles. You do in the aircraft industry, you do not just bring out an aircraft and say that it's going to work, everyone fly. Okay, but you need to kind of have a certain level of testing done before it kind of can take in people. And the tech industry, for reasons good and bad, has been immune to this. And they've always been that, look, we don't need regulation. We will self-regulate. We will bring out stuff, move fast, break things. And that's the way we work. I believe that we have moved fast, but we've also broken a lot of things. Okay? And so I think time to step back and say that, look, if it works for every other industry, there's coexistence in a sense of regulation and innovation. Why should it be different for this industry?
Second row.
As Sanat said, maybe a quick intro would be.
Yeah, I've been very HCL involved in innovation activities. So I'd like to make a point here. So I think if if the regulation and innovation has to go hand in hand, as you said, I think we'll have to segregate the type of innovation. If you're looking at a progressive or incremental innovation scenario, then it's somewhere which is something which already exists, maybe regulation already exists. So the innovation, I think, would go in hand in terms of where it challenges the regulation and how it is being adopted and make reforms in those spaces. But if you're talking about innovation which is happening radically, that is the place where you should not stop or wait for the regulation to happen. It should be the sort of stepping stone for regulations to come in and keep on constantly expanding. That's I would like to comment on that. If there's anything else, then I have a quick question on a quick comment on what you said on super intelligence. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Abhinav.
So you talked about super intelligence, and I agree that there are other priorities that we should be focusing on. But from the AI governance perspective, and to your point of power moving into core technology companies, so there is another key element which I believe will play importance and may demand more attention towards this, is the evolution of quantum computing, because that is going to, and again to your point, the top four organizations would have access to the hardware and capabilities of that. So if you mix the power of quantum computing and the evolution at the pace at which the AI is evolving, and we're already seeing quantum ML emerging and models being developed on that. Not only it can help solve the problems that you say around environment and sustainability, but also enhances our thought process of it needs to be regulated quickly and how do we adopt it. Maybe comments on everyone.
I'm part of S1 software. A lot of, yeah. So on quantum computing, Abhinav, I was hearing this podcast, and there were people who were talking about this technology and say, oh, this is going to make things simple for us. But they were also talking about regulation. A quick point on what you said, Jaspreet. I see technology as the horizontal. I see technology as the enabler. So there is no point in regulating a horizontal, a facilitator. So it's better that verticals should be what do you call it? Should be regularized, should be regulated. Not the horizontal, because anyways horizontal it is there to serve you. That's a quick comment.
My name is Bhushan, I'm from Tech Mahindra. I think by definition, innovation cannot be fit into any regulation. If that was the case, innovation would have happened. I'm just talking about he's a veteran in the car industry, but I don't think autonomous car, when somebody decided to create a driverless car, they already regulated in place. And then they decided. When somebody decided a transplant, heart transplant, or anything. So by definition, I don't think innovation can be tied to say you can innovate, but first think about it. It will never work like that. So that's my view. So I think you can ask the question, but it's restricted. It won't be innovation. It will be planned action to develop something, and that is progress, but it is not innovation.
So my question is, it's not based on the financial part of it, but I'm Aryan. I currently I'm pursuing a course in physics. So my question is, can AI be fractured enough to be used in physics? You talked a lot about generative AI hallucinating at times. And I just wanted to ask this question, can there be a correlation between AI and science that could maybe prevent pandemics or physics, like across all parts of science? Would that be possible?
So I'll encourage you to check out a cool company called Material Nexus. My friend JB runs it, and they're effectively using generative AI to produce net new materials that would be less harmful to the environment than, say, plastics or existing materials. That's one example, I think, of where we'll see new types of languages outside of the natural language processing coming from generative AI, but using the modeling and learning capabilities of Gen AI. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, and a similar example. And we tend to be sometimes overly pessimistic. There's a lot of good which is happening. Okay, and this is one of them. But before generative AI came along, I think the biggest thing that AI and science, well, they're similar, but AI and science collaborated. Let me just put it that way. And this time it wasn't physics as much as biological science. Was when, sorry about this, I have a bad throat. DeepMind, which is now Google DeepMind, created this engine program. Some of you might know called AlphaFold. And AlphaFold basically solved one of medical science's biggest problems, which was never thought to be solved, which is that how do proteins fold? I don't know if you've known about this, but proteins make us, right? They're just about 20 odd amino acids which make proteins, which make us. We are all proteins. But it's not the protein, which protein is in our body, but how that protein actually folds. And think of a protein like a sheet of metal, and it can fold to make a car, or it can fold differently to make a phone, it can fold differently to make something else. And how proteins fold decides the shape of our nose, whether we'll have cancer or not, how long we'll live, everything. And there are more ways that a protein can fold than the atoms in the known universe itself. And therefore it was impossible. But AI, there's nothing to do with generative AI. AI, DeepMind, AlphaFold actually solved that problem. And it might change. I already know biotech companies which have stopped what's called wet work and actually are using AlphaFold to figure out how those proteins will fold. But with generative AI, and this company is now called Isomorphic, which is the big company. But with generative AI, now we've gone one step further to generate those proteins that exist, and maybe you can make a bunch of new proteins which can help us with some diseases, etc. So there's a lot of such stuff which can happen. We sometimes lose it in all the dark stuff that we focus on.
Thank you.
But I think it's a great question, and not to go back to the regulation side, but actually that's why we'll have to remain agile and iterative. And companies like Microsoft have principles that they put standards to with specific goals, tooling, practices to enable those principles to be brought to life, and other companies have them too, but they remain iterative and they remain responsive to the consequences of what happens when you introduce a new tool or a new way of doing, frankly, anything, let alone generative AI. So I think it's an exciting thing to ask in this type of forum, because as you invent new materials, plastic, proteins, you'll have to have new regulations and new types of thinking that evolves with it. So as we speak about regulation, and I'd encourage us to think about both future remaining iterative, remaining agile, but also what are the current problems that the current technology is occurring, and how do we address those by user education and enablement?
Yeah, I just want to add on this, the question he asked. It's a live example in 2021. During the COVID pandemic, there is a pattern identified with the and other people. Based on the pattern, the functions we work on. Need to continue with the lockdown or to put a corridor and stuff like this. So that one part of doing this is we collected a lot of data. Data is important here. That's why I'm trying to put here is AI is different. Regulation needs to be on the data. And second thing is to answer you as well. Most of these big guys are trying to sell their existing platform, not the AI part, because they have invested billions of dollars on their cloud engine and fiber optics. So when you literally buy Vertex, you are buying Google Cloud. When you buy anything on TensorFlow, you're buying AWS. But what is you're bringing in your own data? Data is money. So here, as an example, when you do this for COVID-19 for the corridor stuff to create a pattern, the value is money. We build this using a vendor agnostic tool, putting in a normal data center. we use the open source engine and we do the. To answer you on the physics, anything which has a quality data, when we say quality data, when you can able to train the data with quality data, when you can see a pattern on top of it, yes, it is very possible. So it is all about patterns. So when you have a pattern, you can do this. The second thing is don't fall for all this cheap codes AI engines because they are trying to sell again and again on their hardware. It's not about this thing, but there are a lot of tools.
I can see you don't like them.
See, I'm an advocate of this. See, let me introduce myself. My name is Rajesh, and I own a company called Finstack, which is basically.
So Rajesh, if you keep it slightly short, since there are a couple more waiting.
Yeah, sure. So yeah,
We already know you don't like them.
No. It's not about liking or unliking. Yeah. So yeah, we provide tech solutions for banks and fintechs and governments based on data and regulations. And we have our own, similar to Finacle, we founded our own engines for digital banking platforms similar to. So we some of the 2 digital banks are running with our platform. So that's what I do.
You had something.
You're agnostic.
Well, I know you've been waiting for a long time, Anshu, but I don't think.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. If you could give the mic to Anshu.
My name is Madhav, and it's in the past and now it's Nastra. But my question is more moving away from regulation and core tech to more humans and culture, and ultimately we are generating the data, and therefore we talk about bias, we talk about a lot of things. So it would be interesting to hear your thoughts, Sanathu, and how do you see culture and human behavior influencing how generative AI can be manipulated by populations, by different cultures to make us think differently.
You are the culture expert here.
No culture expert, but the reason I immediately brought this close is that that's actually a article I'm writing right now. See, I think what will happen is that we will gradually find that when you look at aspects of culture, and particularly across geographies, we will find some form of convergence between the social sciences and the natural sciences, which has not happened hitherto in other aspects of technology. And I'm saying that because I strongly believe that the social sciences has a strong role to play in understanding who we are. And that becomes very important if regulation ultimately is not to hinder the usage of technology, but to enable a more responsible and a developmental way of using technology. So I think that, Madhav, that's certainly one area. I think also what will happen, and I hope this will happen because it's a practice that I have used in 2 of my dissertations. I think you'll find that new methods will start getting used in understanding people and their behavior. When I did my master's in digital anthropology, my topic was on privacy, but I did it in Asia, knowing that when I submitted it to the college here, university here, what I'll probably unearth will be very different from the way privacy is understood here. And what I did is that I spent 3 months with 9 households of slightly different demographics. And it's a process called ethnography, where you spend time with your research participants. And the kind of data that you unearth through that kind of a process is, firstly, it comes from first principles, because you're, if let's say this is a group and I'm the researcher, I just sit there, observe, listen, make notes, sometimes ask a question, but you're immersing yourself into a natural environment, but not intervening in the natural discussions that are going on or behavior that's going on there. And sometimes the outcomes that you come up with are more natural and in many ways more interesting than what we sometimes sort of take for granted. If you take privacy, for example, it's very clear that the way privacy is understood varies substantially across cultures. And even within a country, it can vary dramatically within households. Therefore, I selected a household as the unit of research rather than an individual. Right? Because within households, you look at power dynamics, you look at the concepts of, you know, if a grandfather there in his 70s or 80s, the way he uses technology and the way he chooses to draw boundaries versus, let's say, a teenager who's in the same household, and the way the teenager defines boundaries are very different, right? But they are at the end of the day, you argue that because they're living under the same roof and they're the same family, they should be influenced by the same things. But you know, culture allows you to find find demarcations which otherwise you can't sort of make out. So I think going back to your question, Madhav, I think we will find social sciences and natural sciences converging. I think there'll be a lot more attention to things like culture, and certainly I think behavioral sciences will have a very big role to play. And I do hope that, you know, if you go back to what we said in the opening comments, that now that we've got all the stakeholders at the table and there seems to be some genuine intent to try and bring regulation there, and at the end of the day, it can't impede the, you know, responsible use of this technology because it obviously has a lot of benefit as well. I do hope that, you know, they also look at new methods of understanding all of us as people, rather than rushing to say, you know, based on our preconceived ideas, we come up with regulations, and some of those same biases may creep in there. And you know, I think, sorry, just deviating from the question Madhav asked, I think as is being expected, the ChatGPT and other similar LLMs are likely to be a very good source of synthetic data, right? And that will allow you to then sort of in some ways dilute the biases that are inherently existent in data that's currently being used in all the research that's going on.
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, in fact, I want to add, and it's great we are talking about this. You know, one of the other, and before Anshul, and one of the other things which we must understand with generative AI is that it is eliminating the barrier between human-machine communication. You know, humans and machines have coexisted for a while now, a few decades, but we could not talk to them. To talk to them, we first needed to learn assembly language, but then gradually we needed to learn a language which is not our natural language. Languages are called Python or JavaScript or C++ or whatever. And first you have to learn that to communicate with them. And that therefore meant that only a very small sliver of humanity, which were generally computer engineers, which were generally white and male and young and in one part of the world, were able to therefore work with machines and, you know, create whatever. But with generative AI, when you interact with ChatGPT or otherwise, you are interacting in natural language. I can now create, and I have done so, a website, jaspreetbindra.com, using English. Yesterday's Sam Altman's keynote had creation of GPTs. So you can create your own GPT. You can create a Sanat GPT, a Claire GPT, or whatever, using English and all other natural languages. And what that means is very significant, you know, coming to what you said, that, you know, we have kind of reached where we have reached in technology, good or bad, because we kind of only let engineers and computer scientists, you know, work on this. But now it kind of, the base becomes much broader, and it's social scientists and it's linguists, and it is, you know, people who can actually interact and communicate and ask the right questions. Remember, we were always taught to ask the right questions. The right questions are today called prompts, but they are the same thing. And so I think that's a very, very significant, huge development in terms of getting the sociological and the people and machines to be far more closer to each other. Sorry.
Hi, you can hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Anshul. I am also part of HCL Tech. I'm responsible for running the media vertical for HCL based out of the UK. I've had the good fortune of working with the street set.
It's Sir Justine. You just got it wrong.
During his corporate time that he spoke about. So first of all, I must admit that being here listening to you, it's a fanboy moment, because obviously I'm so less informed about AI and stuff like that. All of this is
Now you know why I was keen that he talk.
Clearly, the perspective that you guys are bringing to the table is phenomenal. All of us are reading from normal information, which is obviously building our opinions, but this is very, very fundamental. So I've got two questions, and both of which will require comments from you. One is, whilst we talk about ethics, regulations, and all of that, obviously also some existential aspects of AI. I've got a more industry-specific question. Personally, of whatever I have read from AI and how AI is being now subsumed and adapted to various industry use cases, at my own level, I figure that innovation somewhere is getting compromised versus improvisation is probably taking a leading position. Somewhere, lack of technology, lack of tools, lack of such paraphernalia, which is now available to us, had led to virginity of thoughts, leading to some very path-breaking innovations. Now, with these big techs or any other large language models, the way these AI engines are going to come out and are going to embed themselves in several things that we use, is that not going to start to influence a lot of where we start, but where we end? For example, you said the blank page phenomenon, right? Which is you're starting in, and yes, it is difficult to start, but when you start, every subsequent thought is your own thought, and you end up with a completely innovative outcome. Successful, non-successful is another thing. But now, if I start writing an email or building a code or writing a book or anything, there is going to be a leading thought. Right now, yes, there is a control to switch it off, presumably, right, and then do it. So, what's your comment on that?
Just if you don't mind, before you go ahead for the answer to this, there's one more lady waiting from India. I think it's pretty late.
Oh,
Yeah. Uma, if you can, please go ahead. Hello. Uma, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
go
can
ahead.
hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Uma from Pune, and I work as a lead financial controller in leading retirement solutions provider in the US. I'm a chartered accountant by qualification, so my question is very basic. Like, if generative AI is going to and is also currently revolutionizing the way we work, no matter what industry, isn't it important to simplify it for a non-tech person or a layman like me? For example, what data is used, what are the sources, how is it analyzed, how are the conclusions arrived at? I mean, it's just like cyber risk. It affects every single individual, but it's very complex to understand. So will a AI tool come with a user manual, which is a very simple one? And the other question that I have is that it's kind of a pain point. In financial services, fraud is a very big risk. And one of the ways that they are going to tackle it is, the AI generated content is going to be watermarked, or I think the original content will be watermarked. But what if you use deepfake technology to, create that watermark? Will it be, easily discernible to the naked eye that this is actually an AI content, this is not this is an original content?
So lots of questions between the two, and we have maybe 5-10 minutes more, right? So anyone, any comments on any of these? I have a couple, but I'll kind of reserve this to the end if that's okay. Any answers or comments on this?
I'll share a quick comment. I think both were fantastic questions, and thank you for joining us. And it's a bit late your time, but great questions. To address the user manual piece, again, going back to thinking of the user, especially those who are most vulnerable, children, elderly, people working outside of the technology sector, it's important to understand the basics of how generative AI works, but it's also very important that with any language model interaction, it's very clear to the user that they're interacting with the model and not another person. Again, that's more of a security and privacy thing. So I'd encourage that. And then in my personal opinion on the I would classify nature of intelligence question you pose, that's a big one. But my personal hope is that we don't develop this uniform, uncanny voice that, kind of has us all sounding the same. So I hope we all retain our voices and use, maybe use a large language model to get some thinking out there, to write an email, like those things. But for those truly like human to human connection moments, I really would encourage us all to maintain that and maintain our authenticity as people and people with different backgrounds and diverse opinions that we bring to the table and offer. So I hope we don't lose that whilst it is easy to generate something. And I hope that uncanny voice doesn't creep in too much.
With every new development, so when I won't even go back as far as the Luddites and the spinning jenny or whatever, but even closer to today, when scientific calculators came out, the fear was that children would forget how to multiply or add, and so there were demonstrations in the streets. Similar things happened with computers. Similar things happened with the search bar. The search bar suddenly made everything accessible to us, and so we didn't have to go to Encyclopedia Britannica or to the library next door to kind of figure out, do the hard human work of figuring out stuff. And I think the question, therefore, that you asked has been asked oftentimes before. And the only thing I would say is that successive generations, we cannot say that the current generation, it's not that a certain generation has become an idiotic generation. And I mean idiotic from a scientific viewpoint, which is, IQ less than 50 or something. It hasn't happened. In fact, IQs have been going up. And so somehow, as human beings, as you said, we've figured out how to use this as tools to make our knowledge bases and our intelligence and our awareness better. How? I don't know, but we figured that out. And the hope is that even with this tool, the same thing happens, that we figure out, how we even become better rather than becoming idiots, okay, with uniform voices. And if that happens, by the way, then singularity would have happened. Then the AI would have kind of, there is therefore then there is super intelligent AI, because that intelligence is It's a very philosophical answer, okay, to your question. And the lady asked about this whole watermarking and deepfakes for watermarking. Every technology sets about an arms race. So when software coding happened, okay, then the hackers came with their viruses, etc., and jailbreaks, etc. And then the computer security experts came with figuring out ways to tackle those, and the hackers became better, and the security experts became better, and the arms race continues, and the arms race actually formed in the industry. And I think the same thing is going to happen with watermarking and fingerprinting and fakes, etc. That we're going to have technologies coming in which will separate out AI generated content from human content. When someone is going to come with such good AI generated content that existing tool will not work, and a newer tool will be made, and a newer this will be made. So, and that will spawn a bunch of startups, okay, and a bunch of unicorns. That's the way it works.
My only concern is that some fraudsters studying yes somewhere.
I'm glad that you have just one concern. Sorry, please continue.
If he does like a big, sorry to interrupt. If he does $1 billion fraud on day one, once let's say it's implemented in my organization, he's also studying yes somewhere. Even if he does, it's called some 0-day gain or something. So that would be still a significant loss for me, because I cannot wait for the fraudster to operate, and then implement corrective actions. So
Sure.
that's my concern, that some fraudster is studying AI somewhere and he's probably going to make the gains on day one and not wait for the technology to evolve.
Well, you can bet your last final dollar that someone is trying to figure out how to do that. But you can also bet your dollar that we don't know how to stop him at this point of time. Any last comments or back of the room? There's something nice.
Hi, my name is Adi, and I'm a student studying A levels. I just want to say it's been a really great experience hearing everyone's thoughts and discussion. I'm by no means an expert on this field, but I think I could be after hearing everyone's discussions and opinions. You touched upon how the role of governments with the rise in generative AI, how their authority could be undermined, and corporate firms, their role could rise. And I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on how corporate firms and the governments can work together to ensure that generative AI is used responsibly and safely.
You had something too? Yeah, so maybe you can ask both the questions and we'll kind of end with both of them.
Hi, I'm Shub. I'm also studying A levels, same school as Adi. And I just wanted to ask something maybe a bit more philosophical, more social studies related. So whenever we regulate, that's to bring the benefits and costs of anything you are regulating closer to your societally optimal level, right? At what point does AI cross that threshold? Are we looking to keep generating, keep developing until we can't develop no more? Or should there be a point where we say that, okay, we have enough AI, this is enough development, this is the point where we should finish on?
Anything?
Great questions. Now I'll hand over to Jaspreet for the answer.
Okay, so I think they're amazing questions, and actually this gives me a lot of hope. I'll be very honest. I teach in a lot of places, and one of the places I teach, most of the places I teach are older people, not as old as me, but old enough. But then there's a particular school I teach in which has people your age, younger people, and I see that not only the best questions, but the most optimism also tends to come from there, as well as the right. It's not about they don't ask, will AI take my job or what will happen to my career or whatever, but these are questions like this. So I don't know the answers to both of them, to be honest, but let me just, this question that you're asking in terms of, do we really need to develop it? Actually, very senior, well-known AI researchers are also asking the same question. That just because it's there, does it need to be done? So just because you can set a forest on fire, do we need to set it on fire? Okay, or not? And I mean, maybe there are other things. Spend all this money in solving nuclear fusion, for example, which has a clear benefit to humanity, okay, which no other side to it, no dark side as far as we know. A bunch of those, about 6 months back, 7 months back, actually submitted a petition, very senior people, saying that we should have a pause on developing AI. So let's do a pause, and they said a 6-month pause, right, on developing AI, because we don't know what we're doing, and one day we will find out that cost benefit, that whatever societal benefit optimal level, we've already gone past it, and it will be too late. So let's kind of stop and take a pause, take a step back, and figure out some rules before we kind of move forward. Frankly, they were just shouted down, and it was like there were too many people on the other side saying that this is the worst thing that they ever heard of, and it never went anywhere. And I think for many of the reasons, primarily capitalism driven, we figured out that situation is not going to happen. People are going to go forward. And on the second, so yes, it might be a good thing, but I don't think it's going to happen.
another corporate and governance piece. Actually, if you look at the UK AI summit, the stars were the corporates, while the summit was organized by governments. But it wasn't the governments. I mean, the star of the show was Elon Musk talking to Rishi Sunak, and Demis Hassabis being there, and Sam Altman being there. And I think, therefore, that thing of both sides, especially the governments, have recognized that these are the big powers that we need to work with, and they are at least from the outset working together. But as Sanat said, I think the pulls are too divergent, and we don't know whether they are aligned in terms of what is the outcome that they are looking for. But they have started working together. Great. Okay, at least I know I have a train to Cambridge, but yeah.
See, we have talked about a lot of bad stuff over here. I just want to get some positive side as well. I mean, you have been so close to Gen AI.
There's wine outside, just in case. Positive sides.
What is the coolest use case that you can share? The coolest thing that blew your mind? I'm like, wow, this was a great case of Gen AI, and I'm blown away. This is so cool. That'd be great if one can one of each. So we kind of end on the positive note as well.
Maybe let me go first, because I think in the opening comments I was the most pessimistic of the three of us. So let me say this. There's a philosopher called Werner Erhard, and I think his exact line was, "An idea whose time has come." And I think Gen AI is, so in all this hype around AI, generally speaking, Gen AI is probably the one which you can sort of categorize saying it's an idea whose time has come. Like any new development, particularly one that is still maturing and we don't fully understand, of course, there are going to be areas of concern. Of course, there are going to be areas of misuse by the rogues there. But there seems to be a lot of positive around what it can do for people like you and I. I don't know whether it's easy to pull out one use case. It's probably, it's so contextual that it's probably difficult to, put out one use case. I was invited to speak last Thursday at the FS Club, and the question that the moderator asked is that should it be used in the front office, mid office, or back office of a bank? And I said, if you approach the issue that way, then that's the wrong exam question, because the technology is so powerful and the technology is putting power in our hands. It never needs to be an issue. It doesn't need to be an issue of front versus mid versus back. Right? It can be used in different use cases in each of them, and the enterprise can benefit. So I don't know whether it's one use case, but I believe that if we give credence to the fact that the stakeholders there seems to be at least some starting intent, which is the right kind of intent, which we've not seen certainly in the last 10, 15 years. I think there'll be a lot of good that will come out of this.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, for me, augmenting some of the mundane things I do at work has been really interesting with Copilot. On a more personal note, the other week I didn't want to go grocery shopping and had some random vegetables in my fridge. I put those into Bing chat and was able to make a soup. So take that or leave it.
Brilliant. Sorry.
I'll give you an example. I mean, I was on a holiday in Japan in the end of September. And as a family, we plan our holidays 8-9 months in advance, and all of us do a lot of research. And we had done great detailed research for the 2.5 weeks that we spent in Japan. But about 2 weeks before we went on vacation, I asked this Cloud and ChatGPT. And it was exactly the same question, in the sense that I asked it to one of them and then I copy pasted that into the other. And the response that I got in terms of suggested things to do and see and eat and so on for those 2.5 weeks was remarkably close to the roughly 7 months of research that we as a family had done.
AI has
I was-
replaced.
While I've used it for many other things, that one thing just blew me away. And the fact that it could produce it like this, obviously.
The protein structure thing. I know both of you from Microsoft, but I must say the Microsoft Copilot, unbelievable if you guys haven't seen it. I'm ex-Microsoft. But personally, so I wanted to bring out a newsletter every week because everyone has been asking me that there's so many things happening every day that, can you kind of say the top 3 things or the top 4 things every week? Can you kind of put that out? I said, sure, I'll do that. And I was looking for a name for that, and I couldn't think of one. I wanted a name which obviously had, that was a weekly thing, that it was something happening at great speed, and it was kind of a wrap up of that week. And ChatGPT actually gave me the most amazing name called Weekend Warp. Okay, so warp speed and wrap up. I was like, I wouldn't have ever thought of it. And it kind of just was amazing. And there, I've plugged my newsletter also. Back to you, Subhash.
Look. Okay. Let me draft something in my mind first. Thank you so much. It was encouraging, productive, and I can use all the adjectives probably, but thank you really. It meant a lot to sort of come here, talk about in details, take the questions, and sort of have this cross-pollination of ideas. Before I really end this formally, maybe now that we have time for 5 more minutes, since the things are getting prepared, want to do a quick rapid fire. 3 of you. A simple question. If you have all the money, all the empowerment, and given all the power, with AI, what is one big change you'd like to see in the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Oh, whoever can think of first. Well, so there's this old saying, right? Saying that I went around looking for artificial intelligence, and it's an old hackneyed saying by now. But I went around looking for artificial intelligence, and all I found was natural stupidity. I think today's world is full of natural stupidity. We are seeing all the things happening all around us. I just hope that all this AI thing can make us humans better in the next 18 months.
Thank you.
Mine's quite similar. Again, on the thinking of the user and the user human perspective, but I think that generative AI will democratize the workforce, and with that, I hope that it brings new perspectives, new creativity, and new ideas into previously unreachable places.
Thank you. Sir?
I think while there's been a lot of dissemination around, a lot of discussion around how Gen AI will improve productivity, enable more creativity, and ultimately generate more profits for organizations, I also believe that it will be possibly that one tool that generates more trust. So if the trust can be generated alongside profits, there's nothing for us to change.
Awesome. Thanks. Great. That really brings us to the end of this session, this particular episode of Tech Tuesdays. Before we really wrap up, whatever you suggest to you. Quick thing, for the month of December, the next Tech Tuesday happening on the 5th of December. The topic is esports and gaming. We have Vaibhav, one of the panel members, and a couple of others joining as well. For the month of January, which is our first season of the next year, the topic is Web3. We're still working. We've got a couple of panel members already in place. So if you want to join, ask your friend, family, enemies as well to register for Tech Tuesdays. And yes, as I said, again, please talk about us. Please tweet, share on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything else. And as I also mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, an amazing team of volunteers. They will coordinate with some of you, invite you guys for important bites. We're going to sort of circulate those bites. Don't make any money, obviously, because all of that social media and create some visibility of Tech Tuesdays. Okay, thank you once again for joining. I think the speakers deserve a round of applause as well. Thank you. Enjoy reading and Have a nice evening. Thank you.
It's under the drawer. It's in the middle drawer, top drawer under the glasses.